This is the current CDC recommendations for vaccines for children. On day number 1, they get their first jab, a hepatitis vaccine. By the time they're 18 months, they've had 18 jabs. By the time they get to be able to vote, they have 76 jabs.
76 jabs by the time they're 18 years old, by the time they're old enough to vote. And we're a full-service operation here. Scott called in from Kansas, raised this very point. We went and found it from yesterday's hearing, and maybe not coincidentally, that was Kansas Senator Roger Marshall, who is also a medical doctor, by the way, an MD, not like Jill Biden, who's not a doctor at all. Isn't that amazing? Great stuff. That was for you, Scott. And for Senator and Dr. Roger Marshall. These are relevant and pertinent issues that ought to be questioned. And I've got to say, RFK Jr., I don't know what I agree with him on and what I don't agree with him on. I'm not an expert on RFK Jr. and his various political positions and medical positions over the years, but these are questions that are legitimate questions. And the Democrat Party, they're against being inquisitive. They're against science. It really is anti-science to say that the questions are not legitimate. The questions are entirely legitimate, 100% legitimate. So good for him. And we have, I guess we have a couple more from the hearing yesterday, and a lot going on here. And these are legitimate questions. RFK Jr. He was asked, well, how many people by hostile Senator Warner, Democrat, multimillionaire from Virginia, and he said, well, how many Americans died from COVID? And he said, well, I don't know, because the government numbers are not reliable enough. They're not. You can't trust the government numbers, and that is perfectly legitimate. In fact, Michael Piercy went and found the story out of Grand County, Colorado. The Grand County Coroner's Office is calling attention to the way the state health department is classifying some deaths. This is a story from several years ago during the Wuhan Red Death. The coroner, whose name is Brenda Bach, says 2 of their 5 deaths related to COVID-19 were people who died of gunshot wounds. That's kind of an important thing to differentiate between dying of gunshot wounds with COVID versus dying of COVID without gunshot wounds. See how that goes. That should be treated very differently, if you ask me. Call me old-fashioned if you'd like, but that's something, I got to tell you. And CBS News covered this. I don't think they did it on TV, but they put it online. That was in 2020, December 15th of 2020. A Grand County coroner raises concern over deaths among COVID cases. Even the headline is corrupt and leads you astray. But never mind all that. That's the Democrats. Okay, so let's get soundbite number 2, RFK Jr. yesterday. And he's talking about the general health of the American population, 330 million people, plus 20 million illegal alien gang member, human traffickers, wife-beating, tattooed criminals that the Democrats waved into the country so your daughters would have people to date. RFK Jr. yesterday on Capitol Hill.
This morning, I got the latest numbers from CDC that 76.4% of Americans now have a chronic disease. This is stunning. When my uncle was president, it was 11%. 1950, it was 3%. Today, it's 76.4%. 8 out of 10 of our kids cannot qualify for military service. This is a national security issue. When my uncle was president, we spent 0 on chronic disease. Today, we spend $1.3 trillion. It's the biggest cause. It's increasing.
Now, that is just shocking. Every American should hear that And every American parent, not a parent, living, dead, that's right, dead Americans should be shocked by this too. Astonishing numbers. More than 3/4 of us, 76.4% of us, have chronic disease of some kind. Isn't that amazing? Said when my uncle, John F. Kennedy, when he was president, 11% of Americans had some kind of chronic disease. Now 76% of Americans have some kind of chronic disease. That should be sounding the alarm bell. And he's trying to sound the alarm bell, and he's being shouted down by the Democrat Party, who some would say are in the pockets of the pharmaceutical companies, giving them lots of money so they can get reelected and have power, and people working for them at taxpayer expense and stuff. In 1950, that's a long time ago now. How long ago is that? As 75 years ago. 75 years ago now. 3% of Americans had some kind of chronic disease. 3%. Now it's 76.4%. He said 8 out of 10, 80% of American youths cannot qualify to serve in the United States military because of their health. That is a crisis. And he said correctly, that's a national security issue. Said when John F. Kennedy was president, 1960 to 1963, then he was shot in the head and murdered by a communist. And now the Democrats are voting for a communist in New York City to be mayor. The Democrat Party is not what it used to be. The Democratic Party is closer on the political spectrum today to Lee Harvey Oswald than they are to John F. Kennedy. That's a fact. And they're so pro-Hamas and anti-Israel, the Democrat Party today is closer on the political spectrum to Sirhan Sirhan than they are to Robert F. Kennedy, who was anti-organized crime, anti-mafia, anti-crime, anti-communist. He was pro-Senator Joe McCarthy, anti-communist, but never mind that. And he said, when John F. Kennedy was president, we spent 0 on chronic diseases. Now we spend $1.3 trillion every year, and it's increasing. Those are alarming numbers. And I'm glad that the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services is sounding the alarm, and I'm not surprised that the Democrat Party is shouting him down and throwing things at him, because they're just on the wrong side of everything, and they're corrupt as hell. Man, oh, man. And then he talked about, the Republicans versus the Democrats. Again, he's a lifelong Democrat, of course. He's working in a Republican administration.
All of the arguments that Republicans and Democrats have about single-payer, Obamacare, or with the various ways of allocate the health dollars, they're all like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. If we don't end this chronic disease, we are the sickest country in the world. That's why we have to fire people at the CDC. They did not do their job. This was their job to keep us healthy.
Thank you,
and I need to fire some of those people to make sure this doesn't happen again.
The Democrats don't care if the Washington Post fires 30% of their employees, but you fire one government employee, millions and millions of employees, you fire one government employee, and the Democrats will start firebombing things. They couldn't be more furious. Senator Ron Wyden is a left-wing Democrat, not a moderate, he's a left-wing Democrat. And he goes after Robert F. Kennedy Jr., yesterday, lifelong Democrat, accusing him of all kinds of terrible things.
Robert Kennedy has elevated conspiracy theorists, crackpots, and grifters to make life or death decisions about the health care of the American people.
Yeah, sure. That's, gosh, so you're not a fan then? I guess he didn't vote in favor of confirming him as a cabinet secretary. Boy, when they turn on the Democrats, they turn on the Democrats, don't they? RFK Jr. Responded to Senator Ron Wyden.
Senator, you've sat in that chair for how long? 20, 25 years, while the chronic disease in our children went up to 76%. And you said nothing. You never asked the question why it's happening. Why is this happening?
Why is this happening? Why? You should ask. It's your job. You're a powerful politician, U.S. senator, and he called him, tried to take him to task. That's the guy, Ron Wyden, that asked, good old what's his name, Clapper, James Clapper, about spying on the American people. And James Clapper lied to us repeatedly under oath, saying that they're not spying on us.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
He's lying.
It does not.
He's shocked.
Not wittingly.
He's lying. That's lying under oath twice. And Ron Wyden never followed up on that way. So we are spying on all the American people and collecting all of our data. And then the head of intelligence lies under oath to the Senate. And that's all fine. That's all. And Senator Ron Wyden had nothing to say about that. He should probably be given every vaccine under the sun and see how it works out for him. RFK Jr. and Colorado Senator Michael Bennet. Michael Bennet.
What I said was accurate. What you said were lies. You described people
Senator,
moving the Titanic.
Are you saying that the mRNA vaccine has never been associated with myocarditis or pericarditis in teenagers?
I am simply.
Is that what you're trying to tell us?
I am simply trying to say that the people that you have put on that panel, after firing the entire.
You're evading the question.
No, I'm asking the questions here,
You're
Mr.
evading
Kennedy.
that question.
I'm asking the questions,
I
Mr.
asked you a
Kennedy.
question.
I'm asking the questions for Mr. Kennedy on behalf of parents and schools and teachers all over the United States of America who deserve so much better than your leadership. That's what this conversation is about, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, they deserve the truth, and that's what we're going to give them for the first time in the history of that agency.
Well, that would cause big problems. The truth, you can't have the truth come in. And he put it to him, he said, because we've seen, these world-class athletes, soccer players in Europe drop dead on the soccer pitch of a heart attack and myocarditis, expansion, swelling of your heart, and various other cardio issues. Have been related to the mRNA vaccines, a new generation of vaccines, where young men, young women are dropping dead from heart issues that have never dropped dead before. And remarkable stuff. And Michael Bennet is just yelling and screaming. And if we had a news media, 60 Minutes or somebody would be looking into this, but they don't. And really it's because it's a Democrat Party thing. So how about your myocarditis and your democarditis? Anything there? And he's like, well, I'm going to change the subject and attack Democrat Tactics 101. Let's go to the telephones again, Michael. Let's go to Olivia. Olivia, calling from Kingsville, Texas. Olivia, you're on the Chris Plante Show.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for taking my call. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks. First of all, thank you for having your show every morning. I love listening. I'm a brand new mom, and I'm listening every morning to kind of keep myself sane and
that is
connected
great.
to the world.
Very happy to hear that. Thank you.
Yes.
And congratulations.
As a brand new mom. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I just listen to RFK and all these things, and my husband and I keep talking about whether to get vaccines, whether to not, because it is hard to find the truth, and nobody is asking the questions that need to be asked, especially with this rise in all these different issues that our children are having. 2 of my little brothers have been diagnosed with autoimmune diseases just out of the blue. And nobody really knows why. Why is that happening? Is that our vaccines? And it is scary as a new mom to kind of pick and choose. Do I choose to get vaccines not knowing whether there will be side effects or what those side effects might be? Or do I choose not to and risk my son getting sick like the people like to tell us? And there's definitely some fear-mongering, kids coming out of the womb and getting a Hep B vaccine. Why are we vaccinating our little 7-pound babies with Hep B? My household doesn't have Hep B. I don't know why I need to be told to get my children vaccinated so early. And I agree with you. I appreciate RFK finally asking these questions and digging deeper into these issues because it's a lot.
Oh, I don't envy the dilemma on which you find yourself the horns of, because as a young mother and your son, how do you know it's a son?
We had him. He's 3 months.
Good. That's a good answer. We had him. He's our son. Democrats, they're still
Yes.
confused about that. I understand what you're
They
saying
are.
completely,
Yes.
Olivia. And I would be right where you are now if I were in your shoes. Now, I wouldn't wear your shoes, but if I were, I'd have the same questions that you have, and I'm not sure what I would do. I would get all the expert advice that I could, and I'd look a lot of stuff up, and I would try to minimize my son's exposure to who knows what, right?
Absolutely. But it's also difficult because, as one of your callers said recently, the illegal immigrants coming in our country are bringing back a lot of diseases that were previously eradicated.
Right.
So now I do have to worry about things like measles up in northern Texas here, or, tuberculosis. Like, those are also coming back. So it's not fair to the American people who have been getting vaccinated, and then they're bringing in all these illegal immigrants and spreading the diseases all over again. So I'm not sure how we're supposed to manage that or trust anything that the Democrats have to say on it.
That's absolutely right. And I got to tell you, in New York, they had a resurgence of polio a couple of years ago, and they were being swarmed by illegal aliens, and polio making a comeback.
Yeah.
But Olivia, you sound wonderful. You sound like a wonderful mom and a concerned mother and a smart person, and you're asking all the right questions. And you're listening to the right radio show. I'm just kidding about that part.
Absolutely, every morning.
but I appreciate that, and you're wonderful, and I want you to. And I got to please feel free to check back in with me as you go through this and as you make your decisions. Would you do that?
Sure. Yes, I will. So far, he is unvaccinated. We haven't pulled the trigger on anything yet.
Well, I understand that. I understand that completely. I honestly do. And you've got a perfect son, and we can't believe so many of the things that we're being told, sadly and tragically, and that's what RFK is talking about. Olivia, God bless you, and congratulations once again on your wonderful son.
Thank you so much, Chris. You have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Well, I learned on WMAL News in Washington, D.C., that at noon today, U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., Jeanine Pirro, will be holding a press conference announcing an arrest in the ruthless murder of a 21-year-old Washington, D.C. Capitol Hill intern who was visiting from Massachusetts and working on Capitol Hill as an intern for a Republican member of Congress. And it is an arrest in the murder of this young man, congressional intern. Made a lot of news at the time. Eric Tarpinian Yakam was killed, shot to death in Washington, D.C. And it was months and months ago now. But Jeanine Pirro announcing an arrest. And that will lead us to the crime in Chicago coming up. Little soul finger for you this Friday. The Bar-Kays. A great classic. I have some interesting, peculiar news that requires a little bit of math. But the New York Times was first to report that the Panhandler Broadcasting System, PBS, they've announced that they're going to have to slash their workforce by 15%. And that means they'll be laying off 100 staffers at PBS. And I think, they have a 3-hour radio show over there. And they have, how many? 33 staffers. And we do a 3-hour radio show here, and there are three of us. Michael Piercy, and that's one, and me, that's two. And today we have Jeff Wolf on the phones. Very often Jasmine there. That's a 3. We have a total of 3 people. We do a 3-hour radio show. It's much better than any PBS or NPR show. But listen to this, because they're very upset. And PBS to slash 15% of workforce, lay off 100 staffers after Trump funding cuts. Now, here's the thing. The funding cuts, listen to this. The public broadcaster confirmed the cuts on Thursday to the New York Times, no doubt, citing the loss of $500 million in annual federal funding that vanished in July under a sweeping Trump-backed rescission bill. That means there were cuts, right? Because cutting money, because we're $37 trillion in debt, and we keep spending like crackheads, figuring this is no big deal. 37 trillion. Let's add another couple trillion, right? But I looked at this, and my friend Marty sent me this morning, and I said, well, wait a minute. If we're looking at a $500 million cut and to their funding, and they're going to lay off 100 staffers, how much were these people making? $500 million. You only have to lay off 100 people. And I whipped out my Bomar calculator. It's right here in my telephone. I've got a calculator in my phone. It's a very fancy telephone. You probably don't have a phone this fancy, but it's got a calculator. Got one in my iPad, too. And I use this calculator from time to time. I used it because it seemed obvious to me, but I wanted to make sure. I wanted to double check, so I used the calculator. So if you divide $500 million by 100 staffers, that's $5 million per staffer. So were they paying all of them $5? I'm going to get me a job at PBS, at NPR, I think, and $500 million, and they're going to lay off 100 staffers. That's $5 million per staffer. Maybe that doesn't cover the whole thing, but maybe it does, because it's not their money, and they're not in the make a profit business. They're in spend other people's money business, which is why they have 33 staffers on that. What's that show called? Some Things Considered, or something like that. Some Things Considered, is that what it's called? $500 million, so they got to lay off 100 people. That's $5 million per people. I know, that's per person. I'm only playing with the English language. $5 million a staffer. Isn't that great? Yes, sir. Womp, womp, womp. Your Democrat Party. They're really something. Yeah, this is a Democrat Party operation, front group. All right, now I want to get to, because the Democrat, where's the audio on Chicago? Because Chicago crime and all that. We've been playing this audio for days. The mayor of Chicago, let's go, Brandon Johnson, angry that President Trump would talk about fighting crime. You don't want to fight crime in Chicago. Are you kidding me? There's no crime problem in Chicago. And again, I keep doing like the old Irish drunk joke that, old Irish guy. Do you have a drinking problem? He said, no, I don't have a drinking problem. I drink, I get drunk, I fall down. No problem, right? And the Democrats, they say, well, Chicago's the murder capital of the United States and of Western civilization. Isn't that a problem? They're like, no, that's not a problem. We have thousands and thousands dead, but that's not a problem because they're the left and they don't care about human life. Now, here's a headline from this morning. News Nation. Illinois leaders, they call them leaders, they still call them leaders. Illinois leaders warn of, quote, mayhem, unquote, ahead of ICE operations in Chicago. President Trump was asked a couple of days ago, and we played the audio for you here, are you going to send the Guard into Chicago? And he said, well, I probably will, but I'm not going to tell you when, some point, right? And now News Nation, Illinois leaders warn of mayhem ahead of ICE operations in Chicago. So they're talking about President Trump and the federal government, talking about sending ICE in. All the Democrats waved illegal alien gang members in to maraud around the country. And the Democrats, they don't want any law enforcement because, they raise the criminals, and they are the criminals, and all that. So the Chicago area is bracing for large-scale immigration and customs enforcement operations, which Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker predicted could begin Friday. Local reports have suggested up to 300 ICE officers will soon assemble at the Naval Station at Great Lakes, right there on Lake Michigan, north of Chicago. And operations could start as early as Friday or Saturday. The expected federal crackdown comes as Chicago prepares for Mexican Independence Day celebrations next week. Really? Mexican Independence Day celebrations next week? Okay. It's not Cinco de Mayo, though. That's a completely different thing because it's another thing. But I'm not a Mexican, so that's okay. And 300 additional law enforcement. And the Democrats say, well, that'll be mayhem, I'm telling you, Part of this kind of nefarious plan is begin with ICE, cause mayhem on the ground. Now, this is the governor of the state of Illinois. Pritzker has encouraged Chicagoans to celebrate as planned and to protest if possible. He wants more violence. He wants civil war. The Democrats, you know how they are. They missed the first civil war that they created when they wanted to keep slaves. Now they want to keep cheap labor in the form of illegal aliens. But it comes with gangs and all that stuff. But Governor Pritzker warned residents and activists not to play into their hands when encountering federal forces. It's law enforcement. They're going to go throw sandwiches at him or something, and then their grand juries won't charge anybody for it. So part of their kind of nefarious plan, the Democrat governor said, is begin with ICE, cause mayhem on the ground. There's no mayhem now. And by doing that, say that there's a need for troops on the ground to protect ICE. So, you civil warnicks, you violent mob street criminals, you people, I got to say, and we've had Tom Homan talking about going in with people, and what do you have there, President Trump, and all kinds of mayhem. ABC News Chicago, that's ABC 7 in Chicago. National Guard Chicago, : they love their colons, except they're not talking about National Guard. Illinois communities brace for expanded ICE operations. Protests this weekend. They want protests this weekend. ICE facility in Broadview boarded up ahead of expected protests. That is to say, violent criminal mobs of Democrats smashing the windows and burning the place to the ground. So they have an ICE facility there in the Chicago area, and now it's boarded up because the Democrats, the governor, is calling for riots. They call them protests, but they lie about everything. So when they say protest, they say it's mostly peaceful while the city's burning. We all have some history with that, don't we?
Part of their kind of nefarious plan is begin with ICE, cause mayhem on the ground.
Mayhem.
And by doing that, say that there's a need for military troops on the ground to protect ICE. Don't play into their hand. And if you have the opportunity, please protest, pull out your phone, video everything that they're doing.
Lawsuits, because you want to get the cops. That's the goal, is to get the cops in trouble and save the criminals and save crime. The ICE facility there in Broadview has been boarded up because they know the Democrats are going to come in and a violent mob of criminals who love illegal alien gang members ahead of expected protests, which means riots, because in the English, the Democrat to English translation dictionary, protest means violent firebombing riots where they hope people will get killed. Communities are bracing for possible protests, that's riots, and ICE raids across the Chicago area, only for illegal aliens and gang members and human traffickers and drug traffickers who the Democrats all support. Crews have put up fencing around the Dirksen Federal Courthouse, named for Senator Everett Dirksen, in downtown Chicago. That comes as the expected increase in immigration enforcement. That's law enforcement. That's okay. Enforcing the law is okay. That could come as soon as Saturday. You guys make up your mind on this Friday-Saturday thing. Officials say as many as 300 federal agents are expected to operate out of Naval Station Great Lakes each day and conduct operations in Chicago. Naval Station Great Lakes is serving as a logistical hub for the agents. Now, that's up on the North Shore, north of the North Shore of Chicago there. The president has argued that operations, they are to increase safety in Chicago through community leaders. Community leaders, though, are saying they have doubts about those claims because they're pro-crime. Because every cop is a criminal and all the sinners saints. Every Democrat is a criminal, and they're all sinners and not saints. Isn't it amazing? People gathered outside Naval Station Great Lakes on Thursday night to pray ahead of the expected enforcement. Now, what they leave out here is that it's the Church of Satan, which, they support for after school for the kids. Now, I was looking at this and all the crazy headlines. It's 300 law enforcement And they have, the Democrats waved millions of illegals into the country. The NBC station in Chicago, suburban ICE facility to be used for large-scale immigration enforcement. That's illegal immigration enforcement, but never mind that. Isn't that amazing? Pentagon, the Washington Post now, very upset. Pentagon approves use of Navy base for Chicago ICE operations. Well, it turns out that the federal government is on the same side as the federal government. Wow. The Pentagon and the Department of Homeland Security are on the same team. And the news media, they're very upset about that. Now, again, the governor, Circumference, he says that this is going to cause mayhem, as though there is no mayhem now, right? So I went and I started looking around because that's what I do, and I'm pretty good at this. The Washington Examiner, a great newspaper here in Washington, D.C., and they've got a wonderful story that I found yesterday. The headline is, and that's because it's yesterday's story, and they just published the story yesterday, actually, day before yesterday, and the story came out. Chicago's murder toll exceeds Iraq war deaths. I'm sorry, what? Chicago's murder toll exceeds Iraq war deaths. Now, I've been doing a lot of these numbers, crunching a lot of numbers, and I went and researched a lot of the numbers myself, comparing Chicago's murder toll to the war in Afghanistan. And the good people at the Washington Examiner, and who is it? It's Christopher, Tremoglia, I think it's Tremoglia, or Tremogli. Chris is the journalist on the job, and he's doing a great job. Chicago's murder toll exceeds Iraq war deaths. Now, if there were leaders in Chicago, Democrats all, that cared about human life, and if Black Lives mattered, then they would be up in arms about this, and they would be leading the charge to crack down on crime and murder in Chicago, Illinois. But because, they're Democrats, they don't care about human life because they're the left. They're not liberals. They're the left. So let me share this with you. From 2018 to 2024, Chicago averaged approximately 654 homicides each year and a total of 4,580 murder victims. Again, 2018, 2024. To put this into perspective, during Operation Iraqi Freedom in Iraq, the Iraq War, there were 4,432 service members killed. That's, the entire thing. Isn't that amazing? Now, during Operation Enduring Freedom, the military campaign in response to September 11th, the terrorist attacks on the United States, there were 2,354 service members killed. That's going to be Afghanistan now. Suffice to say, Chicago is more dangerous and more unsafe than actual war zones. Wow. But wait a minute. Over the last 10 years of available data from Chicago, 2015 to 2024, there were 6,512 murder victims. This includes 4 years in which there were over 715 homicides, 2016, 2020, 2021, and 2022, and one with over 800 homicides, 805 in 2021. And then the Democrats tell you, oh, yeah, they're down this year. We're only having 650 homicides. The numbers are worse than the Iraq War. The numbers are worse than the Afghanistan War. And you say you want to reduce the number of homicides, and the Democrats turn on you and fight against you. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wants to look at why the autism numbers are so high in children today compared to 50 years ago, and they shout him down and they shut him down. The Democrat Party should be banned. You know that the big wireless companies, your cell phone carriers, they're pulling one over on all of us. It's time to make the switch to consumer cellular. Listen, I did. I'm getting the same great, fast, reliable, nationwide big wireless coverage without the big wireless bill at the end of every month. But it's not just about saving money, although that's real good. It's also about not being used and abused by big cell phone companies that take you for granted. Do you have any idea how much data you use every month? Most people don't have any idea how much data we use. I certainly don't. Big Wireless, they want to shove you into an unlimited data plan because they need your money to cover the cost of 19-year-olds that are using 10 times as much data every month as you are using. And if you're not using all that data, then you are the one being used. When you've had enough of that, well, it's going to be time to switch to Consumer Cellular. They set me up with a service and a phone, and it's incredibly easy to switch. You call, you speak to an actual human being on the phone, not a computer with a touchpad, based right here in the United States of America, not on a space platform circling the Earth. Real human beings that are actually helpful. Take you about 20 minutes to make the switch, so give them a call today and make the switch. Save money. Be happy. Call 1-800-760-0702. 1-800-760-0702. Yeah, there you go. The numbers are extraordinary. We should share this. I'm gonna share this one too. The Washington Examiner story. Chicago's murder toll exceeds Iraq war deaths. And I've already been sharing with you, exceeds the Afghanistan war deaths as well. And the Democrats don't see a problem with that.
Mr. President, do not come to Chicago. You are neither wanted here nor needed here.
Now, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, right now he's still the Secretary of Defense. But President Trump talking about changing it back, the Department of Defense to the Department of War. More fun. I wish I worked at the Pentagon for 10 years as a news guy. I wish it had been the Department of War then. We had Bosnia and Kosovo and Iraq things and all kinds of stuff going on. But Pete Hegseth was at Fort Benning in Georgia. Yeah, so didn't the Democrats change the name of that because it had been named for a Democrat and they're all racist or something? Pete Hegseth talking about how we're going to treat these drug traffickers as though they're like Al-Qaeda.
Every boatload of any form of drug that poisons the American people is an imminent threat. And at the DOD, our job is to defeat imminent threats. A foreign terrorist organization poisoning your people with drugs coming from a drug cartel is no different than Al-Qaeda. And they'll be treated as such as they were in international law.
I would say an imminent threat rather than a imminent threat, but that's just a grammatical issue.